The first thing I saw after waking from my heart attack was my son laughing in Dubai. Not in a hospital room. Not beside his father. Not even on a phone call asking whether I was still alive. He was standing beneath a massive crystal chandelier, wearing an expensive shirt I had bought him months earlier. Beside him were his wife and her parents, raising champagne glasses like they had just won something. Then my phone vibrated. $6,450. Atlantis Royal Dubai. My hands went cold. I stared at that charge while the heart monitor beside my bed kept counting out the rhythm I was struggling to hold on to. I called my son. "Ethan, where are you?" There was barely a pause. "At the office, Dad. I'm dealing with a major client." I closed my eyes. For 35 years, I had built furniture with my hands. I knew when wood was warped, when a joint was weak, and when something looked perfect only because nobody had examined it closely. My son had just given me the first crack, and for the first time in my life, I decided not to repair it. My name is Walter Mercer. I was 61 when this happened. I spent most of my working life in Los Angeles as a custom furniture craftsman. Tables, cabinets, bookshelves, things designed to survive decades. My late wife, Evelyn, used to tease me because I measured everything twice. "Walter," she would say, "sometimes you have to trust people." I trusted our son, Ethan, more than anyone. That was my mistake. After Evelyn died several years earlier, Ethan became the center of whatever family I had left. He was 35, successful-looking, confident, and always seemed to have some new opportunity that required just a little help. So I helped. I bought him a black pickup truck. I paid expenses when his business was struggling. And when he married Marissa, I let them move into a 3-bedroom house I owned in Silver Lake. No rent. No mortgage. I told myself it was what a father did when he had the means. Then months before my heart attack, I started noticing strange transactions on an account Ethan had access to. I ignored them. That is the embarrassing part. I ignored them because accepting the truth about my son hurt more than losing the money. But lying in that hospital bed changed something inside me. That night, after Ethan told me he was working, I opened 18 months of bank statements. One charge became 3. 3 became 12. And 12 became a pattern. Restaurants I had never visited. Luxury hotels I had never stayed in. Car services I had never ordered. Then I reached the newest transaction. Dubai. $6,450. I looked at the photograph again. Ethan was smiling. His wife was smiling. Her parents were smiling. Everyone looked happy. Everyone except me. I called my attorney, Martin Hale, at 7:18 the next morning. When he answered, I didn't explain everything. I simply said, "Martin, I think I've finally discovered what my generosity has been paying for." There was silence. Then he asked, "What do you want to do?" I looked at Ethan's photograph one more time, and I gave him an answer that would change my son's life before he even landed back in America. "Nothing dramatic," I said. "Just make sure everything I do is legal." Because Ethan still believed his father was lying helplessly in a hospital bed. He had no idea that, while he was enjoying Dubai, I had already started taking back the life I had spent years handing to him. And the first thing I was going to take back wasn't the house. It was something he believed he owned. The truck. I didn't cancel Ethan's card that morning. I froze it. There was a difference. Canceling it would have felt emotional. Freezing it was deliberate. I wanted the next thing Ethan discovered to be something he couldn't blame on a misunderstanding. My nurse, Ruth, came into my room around 7 and immediately noticed the folder sitting beside my bed. "You didn't sleep," she said. "I had some things to think about." She looked at me for a few seconds. "You're recovering from a heart attack, Mr. Mercer. Whatever you're thinking about can wait." I almost smiled. For years, I had been telling myself the same thing. Wait. Wait until Ethan gets established. Wait until his marriage settles down. Wait until he pays me back. Wait until the right time comes. But suddenly I wondered something that frightened me. What if waiting was exactly how I had allowed this to happen? I asked Ruth for my phone charger. Then I called Martin. "I want the secondary card frozen immediately," I told him. "Walter, are you certain?" "Yes." "And the house?" I looked toward the window. The Los Angeles skyline was beginning to brighten through the glass. "My son and Marissa are living there without paying rent." "Correct. I want the property documents reviewed." Martin was quiet. He knew me well enough to understand that I wasn't asking him to threaten my son. I was asking him to find out exactly where I stood. "I'll handle it," he said. After we hung up, I contacted the bank myself. The representative asked me whether I believed the transactions were fraudulent. I stared at the Dubai charge, then at the restaurant charges, then at the hotel. I authorized Ethan to use the account, I said carefully. But I did not authorize these purchases. That distinction mattered. I asked for a complete transaction history and requested that the secondary card be frozen while the bank reviewed everything. By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not because I was afraid, because I finally understood how much I had been refusing to see. The total wasn't $6,000. It wasn't $12,000. It wasn't even $20,000. Over the previous 18 months, the unexplained spending had reached $27,860. I stared at that number until it blurred. Then I remembered Evelyn. When she was sick, she used to sit at our kitchen table and sort receipts into little piles. Groceries, utilities, medical bills. She always knew where every dollar went. I used to tease her about it. Now I wished I could hear her laugh at me one more time. I whispered, "You were right, Evie." My voice cracked. That was when Ruth came back into the room. She saw my face and didn't ask what happened. She simply pulled the visitor chair closer. "Bad news?" she asked. "Family." She nodded slowly. "Sometimes that's worse." I looked at her. She gave me a small, knowing smile. Then she said something I wouldn't forget. "Don't make a permanent decision while you're furious. But don't let guilt make the decision for you either." After she left, I called Martin again. "The truck," I said. "What about it?" "It's mine. The title is in my name." "Yes. I want it brought back." Martin understood immediately. He explained that because I was the registered owner, I could legally recover the vehicle, but everything had to be documented properly. "Where is it?" "At LAX. Ethan had taken it to the airport before flying to Dubai." I almost laughed. He had driven my truck to the airport, parked it, boarded an international flight, and apparently assumed it would still be waiting for him when he returned. He was right about one thing. It would be waiting, just not where he expected. Martin arranged the paperwork. By the afternoon, the truck was being transferred to secure storage. Then he brought up the house. That conversation hurt more. "Walter, if Ethan and Marissa have been living there with your permission, you need to follow the proper notice process." "I understand. You can't simply change the locks." "I won't. Then I'll prepare the notice." I looked down at my hands. Those hands had built the kitchen cabinets in that house. I had refinished its floors. I had repaired its front door. I had stood in that living room after Evelyn died and imagined Ethan raising children there. I wasn't taking away a rental property. I was accepting that the home I thought I was giving my son had slowly become something he believed he was entitled to. "Do it," I said. Martin paused. "Are you sure?" I looked again at the Dubai photograph. Ethan was still smiling. "Yes." Then I did something even more important. I didn't tell him. I wanted him to come home believing everything was normal. That evening my phone rang. "Ethan." I watched his name glow on the screen. 1 ring. 2. 3. I finally answered. "Hey Dad," he said cheerfully. "How are you feeling?" I looked at the cardiac monitor. "Better." "Good. I'm glad." There was music in the background. Not office noise. Not the muffled sounds of a Los Angeles conference room. Music. And laughter. I didn't challenge him. Instead, I asked, "How's work?" "Busy," he replied immediately. "Really busy. This project has been exhausting." I closed my eyes. A lie told quickly is often a rehearsed lie. I said, "I'm proud of you, son." There was a brief silence. "Thanks, Dad." I nearly told him everything. The frozen card. The truck. The house. The bank records. But then I remembered something. Ethan didn't know I had seen the video. He didn't know I knew about Dubai. And most importantly, he didn't know that the father he had learned to depend on was finally keeping something from him. I swallowed the pain in my throat. "Enjoy the rest of your trip." "Thanks. I'll call you when I get back." "I'll be here." He said goodbye. I ended the call. Then I sat alone in that hospital room and cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just tears running down my face while I stared at the ceiling. Because underneath all the anger was something much harder to admit. I still loved my son. That was the part nobody warned me about. You can be betrayed by someone and still love them. You can be furious with someone and still hope they call. You can take back everything they stole from you and still wish you could go back to the moment before they became someone you couldn't recognize. I wiped my face. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ethan. It was Martin. "The truck has been secured. But there's a problem with the house." I called him immediately. What problem? His answer made my stomach drop. Walter, I pulled the property records again. He paused. There is something you need to know before I send that notice. I sat upright despite the pain in my chest. What? Martin lowered his voice. Your son has been telling people something about that house that isn't true. I gripped the phone. What has he been telling them? Martin hesitated. And then he said the one sentence that made me realize the Dubai trip wasn't the biggest betrayal at all. Ethan has been claiming that the house belongs to him. What exactly has Ethan been telling people? My voice sounded calm. Too calm. Martin knew me well enough to recognize what that meant. He's been presenting the Silver Lake property as his own residence, he said. Not as a property belonging to his father. That doesn't answer my question. Martin sighed. He told at least one person that you transferred the house to him several years ago. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I stared at the hospital window. Outside, Los Angeles continued moving as if nothing had happened. Cars crawled along the streets. People rushed into buildings. Somewhere, families were having breakfast together. And my son was in Dubai, spending my money, while apparently telling people that my house belonged to him. I finally asked, did he actually produce anything? No. The title is still in your name. Then why would he say that? Martin's answer came quietly. Because he may have believed you'd never challenge him. That sentence hurt more than the money. Because it was probably true. I had spent years teaching Ethan that my no wasn't permanent. If he needed help, I helped. If he needed money, I found it. If he wanted something expensive, I convinced myself there was a reason. Eventually, generosity stops looking like generosity to the person receiving it. It starts looking like entitlement. I thought about the house. 6 years earlier, Ethan had stood in the living room with Marissa beside him. Dad, are you serious? I'd smiled. It's just a house, son. He had hugged me so tightly that my feet nearly left the floor. Thank you. I remembered those words now. Not because they were fake. I think Ethan really had been grateful that day. That was what made everything worse. Somewhere between gratitude and entitlement, something had changed. And I hadn't noticed. Martin continued. There is another issue. I rubbed my forehead. What now? Marissa's parents have apparently been telling people they helped finance improvements to the property. I almost laughed. Did they? Not according to the records. Of course not. I had paid for the roof, the plumbing, the kitchen renovation, the insurance, the property taxes, even the landscaping. I had never complained, never sent them an invoice, never reminded Ethan what I was spending. I thought I was helping my son build a stable life. Instead, I had apparently helped him construct a story in which I barely existed. Prepare the notice, I said. Martin didn't answer immediately. Walter, once this starts, there's no easy way to reverse it. I know. You could still talk to Ethan first. That sentence almost broke me, because part of me wanted exactly that. I wanted Ethan to call. I wanted him to say, Dad, I messed up. I wanted him to come into my hospital room, sit beside me, and for 5 minutes become the little boy who used to crawl into my bed after thunderstorms. But I knew something else too. If I confronted him before he understood what I knew, he'd have time to explain everything away. So I said, let him come home first. Martin understood. I wanted Ethan to face reality without warning. That evening, Ruth entered with my medication. She looked at me. You're planning something. I smiled faintly. Do I look that obvious? To someone who's worked in a hospital for 30 years? Yes. I told her only enough to explain why I was upset. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, You know what I learned from my patients? What? People rarely regret setting boundaries. She placed my medicine on the table. They regret waiting until they were too hurt to set them calmly. I looked at her. That sentence stayed with me. The next morning, Martin sent the documents. I signed them. Then I waited. 3 days later, Ethan's flight landed. I wasn't there to meet him. I wanted him to discover the first surprise himself. And he did. His truck was gone. Ethan called me from the airport parking structure. Dad, where's my truck? I was sitting in my hospital bed when I answered. Your truck? Yes, Dad. The F-150. It's gone. I allowed 2 seconds of silence. Then I said, That's strange. Don't do that. Do what? Act like you don't know what I'm talking about. I looked at the window. Ethan, the truck is mine. Silence. What? The title is in my name. But you gave it to me. I let you use it. Dad, I've had it for over a year. That doesn't change ownership. His breathing became heavier. You're seriously doing this right now? I glanced at the monitor beside my bed. I'm not doing anything to you, Ethan. Then where is it? Safe. Where? Somewhere you can't take it without my permission. He went quiet. Then his voice changed. Dad, I need that truck. For what? Another silence. Work. I almost smiled. Of course. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Dad. I could hear the anger rising. But underneath it was something else. Fear. For the first time, Ethan was realizing that something he had considered permanent could disappear. Come home, I said. I am home. No. I looked down at the paperwork on my lap. Come home to the house. He didn't answer. Then I heard Marissa's voice in the background. What did he say? Ethan moved away from the phone. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough. Dad took the truck. Then Marissa said something that made my entire body go cold. He can't take the house too. I closed my eyes. There it was. The assumption. Not please don't take our home. Not what are we going to do? She said. He can't take the house too. As if it belonged to them. As if I had somehow stolen something from my own son. I ended the call. For several minutes, I sat completely still. Then my phone rang again. This time it was Ethan. I answered. Dad, we need to talk. Yes. About the house. I said nothing. He continued. You know we've lived there for years. I know. We've invested in it. I almost laughed. You've invested in it? Yeah. Tell me what you invested. His voice suddenly became defensive. Why are you interrogating me? I'm asking a simple question. He didn't answer. I waited. Finally, he said, we'll discuss this when you get out. No. The word came out softly. But it stopped him. No. You're going to discuss it now. Dad, you're in the hospital. I am. You just had a heart attack. I know what happened to me, Ethan. My voice cracked. For the first time, he stopped arguing. I swallowed. Then I said something I had never said to my son before. You've been living in my house for 6 years. You've been driving my truck. You've been using my money. And while I was lying in this hospital bed, you were in Dubai telling me you were at work. Silence. Absolute silence. I could hear his breathing. Then finally, who told you? I stared at the ceiling. And that was the moment my heart broke in a completely different way. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't deny Dubai. He didn't ask how sick I was. His first question was, who told you? I slowly closed my eyes. That's all I needed to know. Dad, wait. I ended the call. A few minutes later, Martin called. Walter? Yes. Ethan's house situation just became more complicated. My stomach tightened. What happened? Someone contacted my office. Who? Martin paused. Then he said, Marissa's father. I sat upright. What does he want? He says he has proof that Ethan was promised the house. I stared at the papers beside my bed. Proof? Yes. What kind? Martin's voice became unusually serious. He claims Ethan has a document signed by you. My blood ran cold, because I knew I had never signed anything transferring that house. But if Ethan really had a document carrying my signature, then this wasn't just about a spoiled son anymore. Someone had been preparing for this moment long, before I ever saw that Dubai video. Martin's words stayed in my head. He says Ethan has a document signed by you. I didn't answer for several seconds. Then I asked, what exactly does this document supposedly say? Martin lowered his voice. According to Marissa's father, it proves you intended to transfer ownership of the Silver Lake house to Ethan. I stared at the ceiling. No. Walter. No, Martin. I never signed a transfer. I know. Then find it. I already asked him to send a copy. I sat back against the pillow. My heart was beating faster now, and I could hear the monitor responding to every spike. Martin noticed. Walter, breathe. I closed my eyes. I didn't want another cardiac event. Not because I was afraid of dying. Because I suddenly realized that if I disappeared now, Ethan might walk away believing he had won. And I couldn't let that happen. Send me whatever they give you, I said. I'm sending it to you the moment it arrives. The call ended. I stared at my phone. For 6 years, I had thought the biggest mistake I'd made was giving Ethan too much. Now I wondered whether I had missed something much darker. Maybe Ethan hadn't simply become entitled. Maybe someone had been encouraging him. The thought made my stomach turn. Around noon, Ruth entered my room. She took one look at me. Bad news. Potentially. She checked my blood pressure. It was elevated. You need to stop thinking about whatever you're thinking about. I'll try. She gave me the look nurses reserve for people who say something they don't mean. Then she adjusted my blanket. You know, Mr. Mercer, sometimes the person who hurts us isn't the person who makes the decision. I looked at her. What do you mean? Sometimes someone teaches them how to hurt us. Then she walked away. I couldn't stop thinking about those words. Someone teaches them. Who? Ethan? Marissa? Her parents? Or all of them? At 2:16 p.m., Martin's email arrived. Subject, document received. My fingers felt strangely numb as I opened the attachment. It was a photograph. A single page. I enlarged it, and my blood ran cold. At first glance, it looked legitimate. There was my name, Walter Mercer. There was an old address. There was language about transferring an interest in the property. And at the bottom was a signature. My signature. I stared at it for almost a minute. Then I whispered, "That isn't mine." Martin called immediately. "You see it?" "Yes." "Do you recognize the document?" "No." "Do you recognize the signature?" I looked at it again. The shape was close. Very close. Someone had copied the broad structure of my handwriting. The sharp W, the long final stroke. But there was something wrong. Something tiny. Something only a man who had spent decades signing contracts for furniture commissions would notice. "The M is wrong," I said. "What?" "My first initial." Martin went silent. "I always make the middle point higher. Whoever wrote this made it too low. That could be explained. Not the final stroke." I zoomed in again. "My signature ends upward. This one ended flat." Martin's voice changed. "Walter, are you saying it's forged?" "Yes." "Then don't contact Ethan." "I wasn't planning to." "Don't contact Marissa either." "I won't. I'm sending this to a forensic document examiner." I leaned back. "Do it." There was another pause. Then Martin said, "There's something else." I closed my eyes. "What?" "The document is dated 3 years ago." My eyes opened. 3 years. That meant this wasn't some desperate reaction to my decision. Someone had apparently been planning this while I was still paying their bills. "Send it to the examiner," I said. "I already have." After the call ended, I sat alone. 3 years ago. I remembered exactly where I had been. Evelyn had been gone for years. I was still running my workshop. Ethan had been complaining about the mortgage market. Marissa had been pregnant with their daughter. And one evening, Ethan had asked me something strange. "Dad, if something ever happened to you, what happens to the house?" I'd laughed. "Eventually, you inherit whatever is left." He had smiled. "I'm just asking." I didn't think about it again. Until now. My stomach tightened. Had that question been innocent? Or had it been the first test? My phone rang. "Ethan." I let it ring. He called again. I still didn't answer. Then came a text. "Dad, please call me. We need to fix this." I stared at those words. Fix this. Not apologize. Not explain. Fix this. As though my boundaries were a mechanical problem. I placed the phone face down. 10 minutes later, another message appeared. "Marissa says you're trying to destroy our family." That one hurt. Because I remembered Marissa when she first entered our family. She had sat beside Evelyn at Thanksgiving and helped her in the kitchen. Evelyn loved her. She told me privately, "She's good for Ethan." I believed her. Now I wondered whether my wife had simply seen the version of Marissa everyone saw at first. I reached for the photo of Evelyn beside my bed. "You'd know what to do," I whispered. Of course, the photograph couldn't answer. But I knew what she had always believed. Truth first. Feelings second. So I waited. The next morning Martin called. "Walter, we have the preliminary result." I sat up. "And?" "The examiner believes the signature is not authentic." My eyes closed. I felt relief. Then anger. Then something colder. "Can they prove it?" "Not yet. But there's more." My stomach dropped. "What?" "The document wasn't created 3 years ago." I gripped the bedsheet. "What do you mean?" "The paper is newer than the date printed on it." I said nothing. Martin continued. "The examiner believes the document may have been created recently and backdated." For several seconds, the room disappeared. I could hear nothing except my own breathing. Someone hadn't simply misunderstood my generosity. Someone had potentially manufactured evidence. And then Martin said something that made my blood run cold. "Walter, there's a name on the metadata." I swallowed. "Whose?" "I'm not sure yet." "Martin." He hesitated. "It's the name of the person who created the digital file." My heart began pounding. "Tell me." He did. And suddenly, Every conversation I'd had with my son over the last 3 years sounded different. Because the name attached to that file wasn't Ethan. It wasn't Marissa. It was someone I had trusted enough to let into my home. Someone who had once sat at my kitchen table while Evelyn was still alive. Someone who knew exactly how I signed my name. Marissa's father. And then Martin added the part that made everything worse. Walter, he didn't just create the document. He created 3 versions. I stared at the phone. 3 versions meant one thing. Someone hadn't been preparing for a family argument. They had been preparing for a legal fight. And suddenly, the Dubai charge didn't look like the beginning of the story anymore. It looked like the moment they got careless. Because if they had already forged a document claiming my house belonged to Ethan, what else had they been preparing to take from me? 3 versions? I repeated Martin's words because my mind refused to accept them. Yes, he said. The document examiner found 3 separate digital files. I looked toward the hospital window. For years, I had believed my son was simply careless with money. Maybe selfish, maybe spoiled. But this was different. This required planning. Martin, I said, how long have those files existed? We're still determining that. But the evidence suggests the documents were assembled recently and then dated as if they were older. I swallowed. Can you trace where they came from? We're working on it. No. My voice became firmer. I want everything. A pause. Everything. Every file. Every signature. Every transaction. Every document connected to that property. I had spent my life working with wood. You learn something from wood that applies to people. A beautiful surface can hide a rotten core. And sometimes the only way to discover what's underneath is to keep cutting until you reach the truth. Martin agreed. That afternoon, I asked the hospital to let me use the small conference room near the nurse's station. I didn't want Ethan walking into my hospital room while I was still recovering. I needed space. When Martin arrived, he carried a thick folder. He placed it on the table. This is everything we've found so far. I opened it. Property records, insurance statements, tax records, bank transactions, copies of correspondence. Then I saw something that made my fingers stop. A home equity inquiry. I looked at Martin. What is this? He pulled out a second page. Someone apparently attempted to obtain financing against the Silver Lake property. My mouth went dry. Using my house? Yes. When? About 4 months ago. For months. I remembered that period. Ethan had called me saying he needed help with a business opportunity. He had asked whether I could lend him $18,500. I gave it to him. No questions. I had even told him he could pay me back whenever things improved. Now I stared at the paperwork. Did he use the house as collateral? Not successfully. Why? Because the lender discovered he wasn't the registered owner. I slowly lowered the page. That explained something. For months earlier, Ethan had become unusually distant after I refused to sign a document he described as routine. I'd forgotten about it. He'd brought paperwork to my apartment. I was tired. I told him I'd look at it later. He had taken it back. I had never asked about it again. Martin watched my face. You remember something? Yes. I told him. He immediately wrote it down. Don't contact him about that. I won't. Martin turned another page. There's more. Of course there was. He showed me several payments from Ethan's account to a consulting company. The company name meant nothing to me. What's this? That's where it gets interesting. He pointed to the dates. Payments had been made over the previous 7 months. Some were small. Some were several $1,000s. Who owns the company? Martin looked at me. That's what we're trying to determine. I leaned back. Then something clicked. Marissa's father. Martin nodded. That's our suspicion. My stomach twisted. Marissa's father, Grant Holloway, had always been charming with me. He shook my hand firmly. Called me Walter, like we were old friends. He'd complimented my furniture. He'd once even told me that Evelyn had raised an exceptional son. I believed him. Now I wondered whether every compliment had been calculated. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I didn't answer. Then another call. Marissa. I let that one ring too. A message appeared. We need to talk. Please stop listening to Martin. He's making this worse. I stared at the screen. That message told me something important. Marissa knew about Martin. And she knew what he was doing. I showed it to Martin. He read it once. Then looked at me. Don't respond. I wasn't going to. 5 minutes later, Ethan called again. This time I answered. Dad. His voice sounded different. Less confident. What do you want, Ethan? I want to come see you. No. Silence. Dad, please. You can talk to me over the phone. I need to explain. Then explain. He breathed deeply. The Dubai trip wasn't what you think. I almost laughed. You were in Dubai? Yes. You told me you were at work. I panicked. You lied. I know. That was the first honest thing he'd said. I closed my eyes. Why did you use my card? I thought you'd understand. Those words hurt. Not I was wrong. Not I shouldn't have done it. I thought you'd understand. I looked down at my hands. Understand what? That I needed a break. I stared at the table. You needed a break, so you spent over $6,000 at a resort? It wasn't just me. There it was. The sentence I had been waiting for. Who was with you? Marissa. Her parents. I already knew. I had seen the video. But I wanted to hear him say it. Who paid? Ethan went silent. Ethan. You did. My chest tightened. Not physically. Emotionally. A father hears many things from his son. But there is a special kind of pain in hearing your adult child say your money belongs to him without actually saying the words. Did you ever plan to pay me back? I would have. When? Dad, I don't know. Then you never planned to. That's not fair. I closed my eyes. Fair? My voice shook. I was lying in a hospital bed while you were drinking champagne at a resort I paid for. Stop making it sound like that. That is exactly what it was. He became angry. You've always done this. I froze. Done what? Made everything about money. The words hit harder than I expected. I almost couldn't breathe. Everything about money. The house. The truck. His college expenses. The business loan. His wedding. His emergencies. The medical bills I paid when Marissa's pregnancy became complicated. The thousands of things I had never mentioned. And somehow, I was the one obsessed with money. Ethan, I said quietly, you know what hurts most? He didn't answer. I don't care about the money anymore. His breathing changed. I care that you made me feel like an ATM and called it family. Silence. I heard something in the background. A woman's voice. Marissa, tell him about the paperwork. My blood went cold. I straightened in my chair. What paperwork? Ethan immediately said, nothing. I heard Marissa again. Ethan, he already knows. My fingers tightened around the phone. What paperwork? Dad, don't listen to her. Ethan. It's complicated. Tell me. He didn't. Then Marissa came onto the line. Her voice was suddenly sharp. Your son has rights to that house. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Your husband has no ownership interest in my property. He has lived there for 6 years. With my permission. He has maintained it. I paid for the maintenance. You gave it to him. No. Her voice became colder. You promised. I stared at the wall. I promised my son a place to live. No, she said. You promised him the house. I felt something inside me go completely still. There was no misunderstanding anymore. Someone had been feeding Ethan this story for years. And now I knew exactly what they believed. They believed that because I loved my son, I would eventually surrender. The house. The money. The truck. Everything. I said, Marissa, put Ethan back on the phone. She didn't. Instead, she said something that I knew she would regret. You're going to lose him if you keep fighting us. I closed my eyes. For a second, I was back in our old kitchen. Evelyn was standing beside me, cutting vegetables. Ethan was 16, sitting at the counter, asking me for money to go out with friends. I remembered Evelyn looking at me. Not angry. Just tired. She had said, Walter, you're teaching him that love means never hearing the word no. I'd argued with her. I told her she was being too hard on him. Now, years later, her words returned with painful clarity. I opened my eyes. Marissa, I said, you don't get to threaten me with my own son. She went silent. Then I heard Ethan say, Dad, don't. I looked at the phone. Don't what? Don't make this worse. I almost smiled. Ethan, I didn't make this. I looked at Martin. He was already staring at me. I continued. Someone tried to create a document transferring my house. Silence. Someone tried to use my property to obtain financing. Silence. And someone spent my money while I was having a heart attack. Ethan finally whispered. Dad. I interrupted him. No. You listen now. My voice cracked. I would have forgiven the money. He stopped breathing for a second. I would have forgiven the Dubai trip. My eyes filled. I might even have forgiven the lie. A tear slipped down my cheek. But I will never forgive someone trying to make me doubt what I own just because they believed I was too old, too sick, or too loving to fight back. Nobody spoke. Then Ethan whispered, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." My entire body went cold. I looked at Martin. He was watching me carefully. What wasn't supposed to go this far? Ethan realized his mistake. "Dad, I didn't mean. What wasn't supposed to go this far?" He hung up. I stared at the phone. Martin slowly stood. "Walter." I looked at him. "Get the forensic examiner." "Why?" "Because my son just admitted something without realizing it." I looked at the forged document again. 3 versions. A fake signature. A loan attempt. Years of financial support. And now Ethan's frightened voice. For the first time, I wasn't wondering whether my son had betrayed me. I knew. The question was much worse. How many people were involved? Because Martin had just uncovered another name connected to the files. A name I knew. A name that had been sitting quietly in my phone contacts for years. And when I saw it, I realized this betrayal had started much closer to home than I ever imagined. The name on Martin's screen was Daniel Cross. For a moment, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I did. Daniel was the accountant who had handled my business records for almost 15 years. He had prepared my tax returns. He had reviewed property documents. He had sat at my kitchen table with Evelyn while she was still alive. And more than once, I'd left sensitive paperwork in his hands without a second thought. I looked at Martin. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure the name is attached to the file." "That doesn't prove Daniel created it." "No, but it means we need to ask why his credentials are connected to it." I leaned back. My chest felt heavy. Not the sharp pain that had brought me to the hospital. Something deeper. Betrayal has a strange physical weight. You don't feel it in one place. You feel it everywhere. Martin closed the laptop. "Don't call him." "Why?" "Because if he's involved, we don't want him knowing what we have yet." I hated how reasonable that sounded. For years, Daniel had been the person I called whenever paperwork became complicated. If I bought a property, Daniel checked the numbers. If I sold something, Daniel handled the tax implications. When Evelyn died, he helped me organize everything. I had trusted him because he had earned that trust. Or at least I thought he had. Martin spent the next several hours digging through the records. I stayed in the hospital room, watching the sunlight move slowly across the floor. Then, just before 5, he came back. He wasn't carrying the laptop anymore. He was carrying a printed report. "Walter, I found something." I took it. There were several payments listed. Not from me. From Ethan. To a consulting company. Then another payment. And another. I looked at the company name. Cross Financial Consulting. My throat tightened. "Daniel owns this?" Martin nodded. "His son does officially. But the business address is Daniel's office." I stared at the page. "How much?" Martin hesitated. "About $14,200 over 8 months." I closed my eyes. $14,000. Ethan had been sending my son money? No, not my son. My accountant had been receiving money from my son. I suddenly remembered something. 8 months earlier, Ethan had asked me to sign a financial authorization. I had refused because I was busy. He had been unusually frustrated. At the time, I assumed he was simply impatient. Now I wondered what that document had been for. "Martin," I said, "can you find out whether Daniel ever accessed my property records?" "Yes." "And whether he accessed my financial records?" "Yes." "Do it." He nodded. Then I asked the question I had been afraid to ask. "Can he change anything?" "Not without authorization." I looked at him. "But could he have helped Ethan create something?" Martin didn't answer immediately. "That is what we are trying to establish." That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about Daniel. About Evelyn. About all the times he had sat in our house and called her Mrs. Mercer. He had been there when she was sick. He brought flowers after her funeral. He had hugged me and told me to take care of myself. And all this time, perhaps he had been helping my son figure out how to take something that wasn't his. At 6:40 the next morning, Martin called. "Walter, we've got confirmation." I sat up. "What?" "Daniel's credentials were used to access a digital copy of your property file." "When?" 6 months ago." My stomach dropped. "By whom?" "That's the problem." Martin paused. "The login came from Daniel's office." I stared at the wall. "Does Daniel know?" "We don't know yet." "Then find out." "I already did." I froze. "What?" "Daniel was in the office that day." My heart sank. Martin continued. He personally logged into the system. I didn't speak. A terrible sadness came over me. It wasn't anger anymore. It was grief. I had spent years believing the people closest to me were protecting me. Now I was discovering that some of them might have been studying me. My habits, my finances, my property, my signature, my generosity, my weaknesses, everything. I finally asked, "What does Daniel say?" Martin's answer was immediate. He says he was helping Ethan. I closed my eyes. There it was. The truth. Not an accidental mistake. Not confusion. He had been helping Ethan. Does he admit the document? No. Does he deny it? Not exactly. I opened my eyes. What does he say? Martin looked directly at me. He says Ethan told him you were planning to transfer the house eventually, and he was preparing paperwork in advance. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Preparing paperwork? Yes. For a transfer I never agreed to? That's what we have to prove. I sat quietly. Then something struck me. Martin. Yes. What if Ethan wasn't trying to steal the house? He looked confused. I continued. What if he believed the house was already going to be his? Martin stared at me. I thought about all the little things Ethan had said over the years. When I own the place. When I renovate the kitchen. When the house is finally mine. I had always assumed he was speaking casually. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe someone had been telling him for years that my death would eventually make everything his. And then I remembered something else. A conversation I'd had with Daniel after Evelyn died. He'd asked whether I had updated my estate plan. I'd told him I hadn't. He'd looked concerned. Walter, you should really make sure everything is clear. I told him I would. I never did. That realization made my blood run cold. Because if my estate documents were outdated, then Daniel and Ethan might have seen an opportunity. But there was one thing they didn't know. I had updated my will 2 months earlier. I just hadn't told Ethan. And I had deliberately left one thing out of it. The house. I looked at Martin. Can you prepare a new estate plan? He nodded. Of course. I want it done immediately. Walter, you don't need to make decisions while you're emotional. I've never been clearer. I reached for a pen. My son thought my generosity meant he was entitled to everything. I looked at the papers in front of me. I want him to learn the difference between inheritance and entitlement. Martin nodded slowly. Then he asked, what should happen to the house? I looked toward the window. For 6 years, I'd imagined Ethan raising a family there. Now I imagined something else. A family who actually needed it. Sell it, I said. Martin's eyebrows rose. And the proceeds? I thought of the people I had met during my hospital stay. The patients who had no family visiting. The veterans sleeping in temporary housing. The widows struggling to pay bills after losing their spouses. Then I thought about Ethan. He had spent years expecting my generosity to flow toward him. Maybe the best lesson I could give him was to let that river flow somewhere else. Put the proceeds into a foundation, I said, for families who need emergency housing. Martin was silent. Then he said, Ethan is going to take that badly. I know, and he may try to challenge it. Then we'll deal with that legally. After we finished, I called my bank. Then my insurance company. Then every institution where Ethan had been listed as an authorized user. One by one, I removed access. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I finally understood something simple. Trust without boundaries isn't kindness. It's vulnerability. By Friday, everything was documented. The truck was secured. The bank card was frozen. The property notice had been served. The questionable document was under examination. And my attorney had begun preparing the sale of the house. I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. That afternoon my phone rang. It was Daniel. I stared at his name. For 15 years, I had answered his calls immediately. This time I let it ring. He called again. I still didn't answer. Then he left a voicemail. I played it. His voice sounded nervous. Walter, we need to talk. There's something you don't understand about Ethan and the house. I never meant for any of this to happen. I froze. Any of this. Not I don't know what you're talking about. Not someone is framing me. He knew. I replayed the voicemail. Then again. My hands began trembling. Martin was sitting across the room. He saw my face. What did he say? I handed him the phone. He listened. Then his expression changed. Walter, don't call him back. Why? Because this voicemail may be more valuable than anything we've found so far. I looked at him. Why? Martin stared at the phone. Because Daniel just admitted there was a plan. My throat tightened. A plan. Not an accident. Not a misunderstanding. A plan. And then my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Daniel. It was Ethan. His message contained only 6 words. Dad, I know what you found. I stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. And if you go through with the house sale, you're going to regret it. My heart sank. Ethan wasn't asking anymore. He was threatening me. But what he didn't know was that I had already made one decision that would change everything. And this time, I wasn't going to keep it between family. I was going to take the evidence to the police. I read Ethan's message 3 times. Dad, I know what you found. Then the second one. If you go through with the house sale, you're going to regret it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised anymore. I was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that comes when someone you've loved your entire life becomes someone you barely recognize. Martin looked up from his notes. What did he say? Without a word, I handed him my phone. He read both messages carefully before placing it back on the table. Don't answer, he said. I wasn't planning to. Good. He leaned forward. From this moment on, every text, every voicemail, every email, keep all of it. Don't delete anything. I nodded. They're evidence now. That word settled heavily in the room. Evidence. Months earlier, if someone had told me I'd be collecting evidence against my own son, I would have laughed. Now it felt like the only responsible thing left to do. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Walking out into the California sunshine should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like stepping into a completely different life. My apartment seemed quieter than I remembered. The chair where I used to drink coffee with Evelyn's photograph beside me looked exactly the same. Only I wasn't. I made a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and looked at the framed picture of my wife. I should have listened to you, I whispered. Evelyn had warned me years ago. Not because she thought Ethan was a bad person, because she believed every child needed boundaries. I had mistaken unlimited generosity for unconditional love. There is a difference. One teaches gratitude. The other teaches expectation. That afternoon, Martin called. I've spoken with the document examiner. And the report is complete. I closed my eyes. What does it say? The signature is not yours. I let out a slow breath. But that's only half of it. My grip tightened around the phone. The examiner also determined the document had been digitally assembled from multiple sources. What does that mean? Your signature appears to have been copied from an older legal document. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Someone hadn't merely forged my signature. They had taken it from paperwork I had signed years earlier. Someone had deliberately built a fake document piece by piece. Martin continued. We're forwarding everything to the authorities. I nodded quietly. Do it. The following morning, I received an unexpected visitor. Marissa. She stood outside my apartment carrying no purse. No folder. No lawyer. Just tears. For a moment, I almost didn't open the door. Then I remembered something Evelyn used to say. Always hear the truth before you reject it. I opened it. Marissa looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back carelessly. She no longer looked like the confident woman from the Dubai videos. She looked frightened. Can we talk? I hesitated, then stepped aside. She sat at my small kitchen table without touching the coffee I offered. For almost a full minute, neither of us spoke. Finally she whispered. I didn't know about the forged document. I studied her face. People can fake tears. But guilt has a different expression. It makes people look smaller. What did you know? I asked. She swallowed. I knew Ethan thought the house would eventually become ours. Eventually? Yes. And Dubai? She lowered her head. I begged him not to use your card. That surprised me. He told me it wasn't a problem. Why? He kept saying. Her voice cracked. That everything would belong to him one day anyway. The room became silent. I had suspected Ethan believed that. Hearing someone else confirm it hurt far more. Marissa wiped her eyes. My father kept telling him that inheritance was just delayed ownership. I looked at her. What? He said you were old. She couldn't finish the sentence. Say it. He said you wouldn't need everything forever. I felt something inside me finally break. Not with anger. With disappointment. Because somewhere along the way, my son had stopped seeing me as his father. He had started seeing me as a future estate. Before leaving, Marissa reached into her coat pocket. I brought something. She handed me a small flash drive. What's this? I copied it before Ethan deleted everything. My heart skipped. Copied what? The emails. I looked at Martin's business card sitting on the table. What emails? She closed her eyes. The conversations between Ethan. She hesitated. My father. Another pause. And Daniel. Every muscle in my body tightened. How many emails? I don't know. What do they discuss? They planned everything. The room seemed suddenly smaller. They talked about the house. She nodded. The truck. Another nod. The bank accounts. She nodded again. Then came the question I almost couldn't ask. Did they ever talk about me? Marissa looked directly into my eyes. Yes. My throat tightened. What did they say? Tears rolled down her cheeks. My father called you. She stopped speaking. I waited. Finally she whispered. The obstacle. I looked away. Obstacle. Not father. Not family. Not Walter. An obstacle. Someone standing between them and what they wanted. Marissa stood slowly. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because there are moments when words simply aren't enough. She walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned back. For what it's worth. I looked at her. I don't think Ethan is the man I married anymore. Then she left. An hour later, Martin arrived. I handed him the flash drive. He immediately connected it to his laptop. Rows of emails appeared. Dozens of them. He began reading silently. Then stopped. His expression changed. What? He looked at me. Walter, what is it? You need to read this yourself. He turned the screen toward me. The first email was from Grant Holloway. The subject line read, Timing matters. Underneath it was a sentence that made my blood run cold. Once Walter's health declines, everything becomes much easier. I felt sick. Martin kept scrolling. Another email. Then another. Each one worse than the last. Then he stopped again. This one. He looked genuinely disturbed. It's from Ethan. I stared at the screen. My own son had written just one sentence. A sentence that shattered the last hope I had been holding on to. He trusts me completely. He'll never see it coming. I closed my eyes. For the first time since my heart attack, I cried without trying to stop myself. Because no amount of money, no house, no truck, could ever hurt as much as those 8 words. Martin quietly closed the laptop. We're taking all of this to the investigators. I nodded slowly. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello. A calm voice replied. Mr. Mercer? Yes. This is Detective Alan Brooks. My heart skipped. We've reviewed the preliminary evidence your attorney submitted. I stood frozen. The detective continued. We need you to come in tomorrow morning. Why? There was a brief pause. Then he said the words that changed everything. Because this is no longer just a family dispute. My hand tightened around the phone. What is it then? The detective's answer sent a chill through my entire body. Mr. Mercer, we believe there may be enough evidence to support a criminal fraud investigation. The detective's words stayed with me all night. This is no longer just a family dispute. For the first time, I understood something painful. I wasn't fighting my son anymore. I was protecting myself from what my son had chosen to become. The next morning, Martin drove me to the police station. I carried the flash drive Marissa had given me, the forged property document, the bank records, the Dubai transactions, the messages, the emails, and the voicemail from Daniel. Everything was organized. Everything had a date. Everything told the same story. Detective Brooks spent nearly 2 hours going through the evidence. He asked questions. I answered them. Then he asked something I wasn't prepared for. Mr. Mercer, do you want to press charges against your son? I looked at the table. For years, I had imagined protecting Ethan from consequences, from embarrassment, from financial hardship, from mistakes. Now I realized that every time I had rescued him, I had simply delayed the moment when he would have to become responsible for himself. I don't want revenge, I said. The detective waited. But if he committed a crime, I won't protect him from the consequences. That was the hardest sentence I'd ever spoken. Not because I hated Ethan, because I still loved him. And sometimes love means refusing to save someone from the damage they deliberately caused. The investigation moved quickly. Daniel eventually admitted that he had helped prepare documents for Ethan. Grant initially denied everything. Then investigators found the emails, the attempted property financing, the digital files, the copied signature, the messages discussing my health. Piece by piece, the story came together. The forged document was never legally valid. The house was mine. The truck was mine. The money was mine. But something else belonged to Ethan. His choices. And he finally had to own them. The house was sold. After expenses and taxes, the proceeds were placed into the emergency housing foundation I had created. I named it after Evelyn, the Evelyn Mercer Family Relief Fund. The first family it helped was a widowed mother with 2 children who had been sleeping in her car. When I signed the first assistance check, I couldn't stop thinking about how differently money felt when it was used to rebuild someone's life instead of feeding someone's entitlement. I didn't feel powerful. I felt peaceful. Ethan eventually came to see me. Not in Dubai. Not at the house. Not surrounded by Marissa's family. He came alone. He stood outside my apartment for nearly a minute before knocking. When I opened the door, he looked older, smaller, like someone had finally removed the armor he had worn for years. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He entered. Neither of us spoke. Then he looked at the empty space where Evelyn's photograph had always stood. "Mom would hate what I did." My chest tightened. "Your mother would be heartbroken." He nodded. His eyes filled. "I thought you would always forgive me." I looked at him. "I did forgive you." He stared at me. "Then why did you do all this?" "Because forgiveness doesn't mean permission." His face crumpled. I continued quietly. "I forgave the money, Ethan. I forgave the lies. I even tried to understand why you wanted more than you had." I swallowed. "But you tried to take my future while I was still alive." He lowered his head. "I know." "No," I said. "You know now." That distinction mattered. He cried. "My son. The same boy who used to hide behind my legs when strangers visited. The same boy whose first bicycle I had assembled at midnight. The same boy whose college tuition I had paid while pretending the sacrifice wasn't difficult." He was sitting across from me, crying over everything he had destroyed. And the strangest thing happened. I wanted to hug him. My heart wanted to do what it had always done. Fix it. Make it better. Tell him everything would be okay. But I didn't. Not this time. I simply sat beside him. Sometimes the deepest form of love isn't rescuing someone. It's allowing them to finally face themselves. Months passed. Ethan's legal problems continued. Marissa separated from him. Grant faced his own consequences. Daniel lost the trust of clients who had depended on him. And I slowly rebuilt my life. I returned to my workshop. The smell of sawdust felt different. Cleaner. One afternoon, I began building a small wooden table. Nothing expensive. Nothing elaborate. Just a simple family table. As I sanded the edges, I remembered Evelyn telling me years earlier that furniture wasn't really about wood. It was about what happened around it. People eating together. Arguments. Birthdays. Apologies. Laughter. Loss. Life. I stopped sanding. Then I smiled. For years, I had believed I needed to leave Ethan everything I owned to prove that I loved him. I finally understood the truth. My love had never been measured by what I gave him. It was measured by how much I was willing to sacrifice. And now, for the first time, I was willing to sacrifice something different. My need to be needed. Almost a year after the hospital incident, I received a letter from Ethan. I opened it slowly. There was no request for money. No request for the truck. No mention of the house. Only an apology. He wrote that he had spent months learning how badly he had confused love with entitlement. He said he didn't expect forgiveness. He simply wanted me to know that he finally understood. At the bottom, he wrote, "Dad, I don't want your money anymore. I want to become someone you can trust." I read that sentence twice. Then I folded the letter. I didn't call him immediately. I didn't rush to make everything normal. But that evening, I sat at my kitchen table and dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. "Dad." His voice cracked. I looked at Evelyn's photograph. Then I said the words I'd wanted to say for almost a year. "I'm proud of you for finally understanding." He started crying. So did I. But this time, the tears weren't only from pain. They were from possibility. We talked for nearly an hour. There were no promises that everything would return to the way it was. Because it wouldn't. Some wounds leave scars. But scars don't always mean the story is over. Sometimes they simply prove that something survived. Today, I still live simply. I still work with my hands. I still measure twice before making a cut. But I no longer confuse generosity with obligation. I no longer believe saying no makes me a bad father. And I no longer fear losing someone simply because I refuse to let them use me. Ethan didn't inherit my house. He didn't inherit my money. He didn't inherit the life I had built. But I gave him something far more difficult. A chance to build his own. And maybe that was the final lesson Evelyn had been trying to teach me all along. Love doesn't mean giving someone everything. Sometimes love means giving them the chance to become worthy of what they once took for granted. I still miss my wife every day. Sometimes I sit at the kitchen table and imagine her sitting across from me. I imagine telling her everything. The Dubai trip, the forged document, the hospital, the investigation, the apology, and I know exactly what she'd say. She'd probably smile and ask the same question she always asked whenever I made something complicated. Walter, did you finally learn? I'd smile. Yes, Evie. I finally did. Because my son didn't destroy me when he betrayed me. He taught me something I should have learned much earlier. A father can love his son with his whole heart and still refuse to let that son destroy his life. And sometimes the strongest thing a parent can say isn't, "I'll give you everything." It's, "I love you too much to let you become this person."